There is a clear lack in terms of preparedness for the European Union, which has to do with the domestic politics. And then, of course, there's the larger context of issues which are not part of the EU accession in the narrow sense, but we know in the case of Kosovo, of course, it's the non-recognition by 5 EU member states. In the case of Bosnia, it's the complicated internal organization and the kind of confrontational politics which make it difficult. So there's both the kind of formal preparedness for EU accession as well as the more, in a certain way, political context which hold the two countries behind. At the end of the day, it's domestic political elites who are accountable for this. I think we can certainly be critical of the international engagement in both countries. Again, I think in the case of Kosovo, it's mostly the external circumstances, the inability of the EU to persuade all its members to recognize the country. For Bosnia, it's been really the inability to convince domestic elites that they should put their internal disputes aside and work on making the country ready for the EU membership. I think Serbia and Montenegro would have to do a lot more than they've been doing over the last years to actually achieve this goal. If we think about the date to join by 2025, you actually have to complete negotiations roughly by 2022, which means in 4 years' time. And we've seen in both countries a lot of fake reforms, a lot of formal reforms, but not substantive reforms. And it's not clear that governments in both countries are really committed to those reforms. I do think that the EU has been probably excessively strong when it comes or strict with the criteria. I think the EU has been flexible on conditions at times. That flexibility in places like Bosnia has not always been helpful, but I think in the case of Kosovo, the isolation of its citizens is certainly destructive. I think there's a point in time when conditions outlive their usefulness, and they have certainly done so in the case of Kosovo, because I think now the only thing left over is kind of tangible progress in the question of rule of law, and that's a very difficult to measure benchmark. So I would say that it's really important, especially considering that countries which are not even considered to be potential candidates of the European Union have had visa-free travel enabled. I think it's for Kosovo symbolically, this would really matter and would help to kind of overcome this isolation which many citizens experience.